Okay, Kum Len the Black Motor. We jumped to the spot today. We are up to that test Amid Aleph, new Perik. Nazir is very technical as well. Because we already learned that 4 different kinds of Nazirism. And we didn't even talk about Nazir Shmuel yet, which is towards later, much later. But just it's very technical. So now we're going to learn the Machlekes Beisham Beis, and there's like 4 ways of learning the Machlekes Beisham Beis, and then in the Rishonim there's different opinions. So we're not going to confuse anybody. We'll just stick to one way of learning. But this is Machlekes Beisham Beis, and you're going to learn a number of ways of how to understand it. The Mishnah says, a person said, Hareini Nazir, I will be a Nazir, min agroigis min advela. Now, if he would have stopped right then and there and said, I'm a Nazir, then he's a Nazir. We know what a Nazir is, and you have to abstain from wine and so on and so forth. But he decided to add on, I'm a Nazir from what? From Gregor's dried figs, min advela, from pressed figs. And there's no such thing as Naziris. So how do we understand it? Now, just to bring in here a little conversation we learned a few times in the Durham and other places, and we learned in Torah and other places, and that is that if a person says, for example, this animal here should be the Tumura in exchange of an Oiler, and then he said this animal should be the exchange of a Shlamim. Machlekes Rameir Rabbi Yossi, how we understand it. Rameir says you listen to the first words he says, and that's it. But maybe he's changing his mind, and it's once the first words were said, it's final. And Rabbi Yossi says af bigmar, even though he doesn't use the word af, but we add af bigmar dvarim mitzvos. Rabbi Yossi says listen to the whole thing. You couldn't have said both words at the same time. What you do is you let the animal wander about, contract a mum, you sell it, and half the money you use to buy an oil, and half the money you use to buy a shlamit. So we already have a machlekes. Do you listen to the first words, or do you listen to all the words? And where the second words can be reconciled with the first words, but you can sell the animal and divide it, fine. Where the second words cancel the first words, then it's considered a cancellation. So that is the machlekes of Rabbi Yossi Rameir, and then we'll see how this also comes to our Gemara over here as well. If there's another machlekes, Rameir says that a person does not say words in vain. So, for example, if I say that the erech of a erech is erkin, which we learn at the end of Parshas, we learn in the end of Chumash Vayikra, where a person says, "I'm going to give my value," and use the word erech. There's damim and there's erech. Damim means the value in the marketplace. Whatever it is, it is. Every person is different. But erech is what the Torah fixes valuations. If I say the erech of this keli I'm donating, everyone knows you cannot give an erech of a keli. Erech is only of a human being, of a person, a male or a female, depending what age. So the mayor says, say, okay, that's it. The mayor says, no, ain't adam nobody just says words tamazday. So we interpret that he meant to be either the value. We take those words and we interpret in a way that it should actually have meaning, and it should be valid and effective. Okay, these are 2 things that I may have to know. Now we can learn the Gemara. So Mishnah, I'll be a Nazir, and then he said which seems to contradict what he started out saying. Starting out saying I'm a Nazir from wine, then he turned it into figs. Is Beishamai says Nazir? Beishamai says yes, we'll be a Nazir. What's the opinion of Beishamai? We'll see the Gemara, maybe because you listen to the first words he says. And Beisil says, ain't a Nazir. And Beisil says it's not a Nazir because you cancel what you said. Nor, maybe, is it a neder that you, okay, well, so what about dried figs? Can you eat that? Nor is it that, because he said Nazir. There's also thing is a Nazir from dried figs, so nothing happened. According to Beisil, it's nothing. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda, he says, I don't believe that that's the argument. This is now opinion number 2, how to understand the argument. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Nobody thinks that he's a Nazir. Because in the same sentence, when he said, I'm a Nazir, he said, I'll be a Nazir from dried figs and from pressed figs. Then obviously he's not talking about a Nazir, what we think is a Nazir. So everyone agrees, even Beishamai, there's no Nazir here. Rabbi Yehuda says, but Beishamai is saying it is a neder here. Not a Nazir, but a neder. A neder that what? Not that I'm a Nazir. As a neder is, I'm not going to eat dried figs or pressed figs. That's all. And but it still says there's no neder here, either because he used the wrong word. Says the Gemara, what do you call it? Now, even though we learned in the Dora, Yehuda holds, if you want to say this bread, you can't say this bread is a carbon. You have to say this bread is like a carbon. And here he says, Gregus and Devela. So, and you're saying here that what? That he's saying, Hare Heina like carbon, that this dried fig should be a carbon. According to Yehuda, that doesn't happen because the dried fig is not a carbon. You should say like a carbon. So the Rishonim already explained that the moment he says Harei Hein Alai, it's a different story. There he's talking about this bread should be a carbon. But Yehuda says you can't do that. I say bread is like a carbon. But here we're talking about, he said, I take it upon myself. Then even if he just says carbon is good enough. Now the Gemara will try to explain what's going on. So we have the Tanakama's version of Beis Shammai and Rabbi Yehuda. The Kama says that they're arguing about whether you're a Nazir or not. And Beis Hillel holds you're a Nazir. Beis Shammai says you're a Nazir. Beis Hillel says no Nazir, no Neder. And Rabbi Yehuda says nobody believes it's a Nazir. They're only arguing whether it's a Neder or not. Okay, so the Gemara, Hareni Nazir, Beis Shammai, Nazir. Why are you a Nazir? Why are you a Nazir? Because she asked him again from the Yain Rachmana, the Torah said that a Nazir is only if you refrain from wine. Here is it's dried figs. Where does that come to Nazir? So Gemara says, Beis Shammai, so look at Rameir. So now we have an explanation. Beis Shammai follows the view of Rameir. Which Rameir are we talking about? The Amar who says, Ein Adam Moiti Dvorel Vatola, people do not say words. In the belt, right? So if you said that the erech of a keli I take upon myself, there's no such thing as the erech of a keli. So Beis Shammai therefore says it means the value. So therefore, if you said Nazir, from Gregus, you don't say words in vain. You meant Nazir. You just didn't know about the Gregus veil, but you meant Nazir. They still hold like Rabbi Yossi that says we listen to the last words that you say. And the problem in this case is, in the case of the Tumuras, Oila, Tumuras Shlamim, you take one animal, you sell it, and half of it can become an Oila, and half of it can become a Shlamim. Here, you start off saying a Nazir, and then you're canceling it. Because by the moment you start, you're describing the Naziris from dried figs. You're not talking about Nazir anymore. So here you started one way and you cancel the second way. And your BHC says you listen to the second words the guy said. And therefore we're going to treat it as if Neder upischimai. As if he said, I'll become a Nazir. And a second later he said, but this is my opening, I only meant the Gregulus and Vela. Okay, so therefore, even according to Beis Shammai, here you're contradicting yourself. You're saying a neder be a nazir, right away you're canceling out. How come Beis Shammai doesn't agree with that? Why does Beis Shammai say no? You do become a nazir. Here, no, that's over there that Meir is talking about. I said the words erech kliyalai. All I said was the erech of a kelim. So a person doesn't stand in the bell talk. So you have to try to interpret his words to make it work. Over here, he spells it out. He says, I'm a nazir from Gregus and Vela. In other words, I'm making an ed and I'm canceling it. Or because all I want to be is a nazir from Gregus, which you can't, there's no such thing. And we have a rule that if you're making an edit, and right away you give an opening has to get out of the neder, everyone agrees there's no neder. So what's going on here? Ella, you want to get another expression? Beis Shammai hold like a mayor as follows. The ain't other a person that says something they want it to have meaning and significance. The kivan the Amar Hareini Nazir. This is what Shammai says. The first words that you said was, I will be a Nazir. Havale Nazir. So you became a Nazir straight away. When we say Kika Amar, so according to the mayor, we break up your sentence into two parts. The first sentence was, I'll be a Nazir. End of story. Stop. You became a Nazir. And now what he wants to do is he wants to get out of it. It's not like one sentence. He wants to get out of it. So he wants to what? He wants to be shoyal. He wants to, like, as if he regrets what he said, and he wants to now unravel that neder. The problem is you cannot unravel a neder. Why? Because he karma, when he says what's he trying to say? He's trying to cancel what he started out saying. He wants to be shoyal. He wants to unravel it. He wants to get the chachamim to be matter. The problem is, Beis Shammai is consistent with the view, the Amri, he says, Ein Shaila behegdish. Beis Shammai says that if you made hegdish by mistake, it becomes hegdish. We hold hegdish betos is not hegdish. Beis Shammai says the moment you said something is hegdish, the words are so sacred, even though you is a mistake, it becomes hegdish. So therefore, when I said nazir, and a person, the Torah describes a nazir, kadosh yiyah. You're like Hegdish. The person himself is like Hegdish. So therefore, the person as soon as he became a Nazir, he's a Nazir. Now you want to be sure, you want to retract. Hegdish cannot be retracted. That's the sword of Rabbi Shammai.
You're going to be Meir's interpretation. Why wouldn't you say you divide his words, Hareni Nazir, and then he's being moisif? Not only a Nazir,
because the Meir says we only focus on the first words you say, especially it's two different words. Because Nazir don't do with Vela. So you said Nazir, then you said Ma'aser Gregus and Vela. So the first one became a Nazir. And now you're trying to get out of it. One of the Rishonim wants to learn has to do with Tech Kedei Dibur Dami. So you're trying to fix yourself up. And Beis Shammai holds we don't say Tech Kedei Dibur kedibur dummy when it comes to hektish. In other words, once by we remember last time we had learned a few exceptions like avodah zarah that once you said it you cannot retract or megadot. Once you said you cannot or kedushin and gittin. Once you said you cannot retract. Beishamai hold the same with hektish. It's Tekadibur. But the wording in our Gemara doesn't sound like it has to do with Tekadibur. It has more to do with the fact that you cannot be Mata Neder from Hektish, according to Beis Shammai. So the moment you said you're Nazir, you became Kodesh, you became holy, you became a Nazir, and now you're trying to unravel it. Beis Shammai said you can't. But even in Shai Hektish, ain't Shai Naziris. Since you cannot unravel Hektish, no can you unravel Naziris. And they still hold like Rav Shimon. What's the story with Rav Shimon? Rav Shimon says. The Tzam, we learned the Mishnah. Rab Shimon says, if what happens like this, a person says, I will bring a carbon mincha from barley. Now, carbon mincha comes from wheat. Carbon mincha comes from fine flour, soyus, not from barley. There are two exceptions that we do bring a carbon mincha from barley. One is the carbon tzibur known as carbon ha'omer. It comes from barley. And the other one is by a soita. Minchas kanais. Those are only two that come from barley. Okay, the next 2 weeks I'm overseas. I'm come back. So so it's barley. What do you call it? So if a person makes a neder, I'll bring a mincha from barley. Rav Shimon says we don't look at first word, second word, say, oh, he meant the mincha, and that's it. Make the mincha, and now you're trying to retract. No. Rav Shimon says, we look at it as one sentence. You said it in a way that's impossible to happen, and therefore nothing happened. And that's what basically holds. So if you said Nazir, nothing happens. Okay, so now we understand what's the machlekes the way we learn right now. According to Tanakama, machlekes is Beis Shammai says I follow the Meir Tfeisla tradition, and you said you're a Nazir, and then now you want to cancel it. You can't cancel. And Beis Hillel says no. I followed Rav Shimon that if you're not menadiv, it's one sentence. If you're not menadiv, and we said like Rabbi Yossi before that you follow the last word as well, it's all one sentence. And since you were not menadiv, kederech menadivim. In the case of Rabbi Yossi, they're not mutually exclusive. If you sell the animal, you can turn it half into an oil and half into a shlam. Here, they're mutually exclusive. Nazir is wine, Greg is something to do with wine. So when Rabbi Shimon says, if you're nadiv, okay. So right now we're learning that the case of mincha and barley is the same case as by us, Nazir and grapes. Okay, let's remember that. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, Masisa like Tana, our mission does not follow the following Tana. Tanya, a third way of learning pshat in the argument of Beis Shammai. Rab Nosson says, Beis Shammai Omer, Nodar v'Nazir. Beis Shammai says, not only, Tanakama says you become a Nazir. That's it. Beis Shammai says, no, we'll take everything you said seriously. You become a Nazir, but you also made a neder about Greigus and Devela, so you cannot eat the Greigus and Devela either. According to some of the Shainim, it's either or. We'll ask him which one did you want. But the way you're supposed to read out Gemara and some other Shem learn is both. He became a Nazir, and he made a vow not to eat from any more Greigus and Devela.
So I'm saying like Eino Ela Nazir.
So he's arguing Tanakama. Tanakama says that Beis Shammai says you're a Nazir, right? Comes along, but Nazir says no, and no net, they're just Nazir, right? And because we listen to the first word you said, and the Nazir says no. The Nazir says we listen to everything that you said. Everything takes effect. Says the Gemara, and Beis Hillel says Nodar v'Nazir. He also argues how you understand Beis Hillel. Tanakama, so Beis Hillel says you walk away, nothing happened here. You just said you didn't say the normal way, nothing happened. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Hillel says nothing happened. Beis Shammai says only neder. Kol Nazir says no. Beis Shammai says both neder and nazir. And Beis Hillel says there is a neder here. Third way of learning pshat. Beis Hillel I mean neder ve'ein nazir. What's pshat? Beis Shammai holds like Rameir, Uke Rabbi Yehuda. Beis Shammai holds like Rameir, like Rabbi Yehuda. He holds like Rameir. You listen to the first words, but he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that says that he also meant neder. You know, like as if he said hareya like carbon. So both of them are effective. Both. And Beis Hillel holds, or if you learn the other word, Shem would say or. We ask him which one he meant because it could be either like Rameir or Rabbi Yehuda. It works. And Beis Hillel says Rabbi Yossi. Beis Hillel holds like Rabbi Yossi. Now what? You listen to the end words that you said. And what were the end words that you said? A neder from Gregorius and Vela. Okay, so we have a neder. Okay, that's version number 3, how to understand the Machlegi Beis Shammai. Version number 4. Lishna Acharina, another way of learning. Amri Rab Nosson, Rab Nosson says, Beis Shammai says, Nodar ve'eino nazir. Beis Shammai says, there's a neder, there's no nazir. Right? Which is the way Rabbi Yehuda learns in our Mishnah. And Beis Hillel says, loy neder v'loy nazir. And Beis Hillel says, there's no neder here, and there's no nazir here. Beis Shammai ki Rabbi Yehuda. Beis Shammai holds like Rabbi Yehuda that what? That there's no nazir here, but there is a neder, like Rabbi explained in our Mishnah, that there's no nazir here because right away you said you described the naziris from Gregorius, but there's a neder here, as if you said it's a carbon. And Beis Hillel says there's not even a neder here. Why? Because he did not do it the normal way, which is more or less what Rabbi Yehuda learns. Shat and Beis Hillel as well. Or Beis Hillel ki Rabbi Shimon. Beis Hillel holds like Rabbi Shimon that why let it be a neder. You said be a neder. The reason is because he says you did not donate it in the normal way. Nobody says nazir if you meant neder. It's not the normal way of doing it. Says the Gemara. It's not how to be learned. Now, what's the exception? If a person says, I will bring a mincha, I'll bring a mincha from barley, is yavi menachitin. We say that what? We take a look at the first word you said. The first word you says mincha, so you do a mincha. Mincha is mincha man a wheat. You said so afterwards. We ignore the second word that you say. Kemach, if he says I'll bring from the poor flour, we know that all minchas are from the good flour. Is yavi silus. Again, but listen to the first words you say. Shalai b'shem and levina. I will not bring oil and levina, which is only by minchas chayte. All other minchas you have to have oil and that and frankincense. Again.
Follow the standard procedure.
If it has chatzi yisaren, we know the minimum amount of the flour you have to bring is an yisaren. He said, I'll bring a half of yisaren again. You bring the mincha, the right one, and we ignore the last words. Yavi yisaren shalom. If he says yisaren umachza, so it sounds like he wants to bring two minchas. Yavi shnai. Come along, Rav Shimon, it says in all these cases, you did not donate the normal way, which is what we're saying Beis Hillel hold as well. Since you did, when you said I'll be a nazir from Gregorius, you did not. That's not the normal way. Not the normal way. Nazir, so nothing happened. Says the Gemara, Man Tana, who's the one who learned the Amar Harei Alai Mincha Min Asa'odim maybe Menachit? So who is the Tanakama? The Tanakama here said, we listened to the first words you said mincha, even though you followed it up with min ha'sa'edim, you bring a card mincha. Who is that author? Who is it? Chizkiah said, well, that's isn't that our Mishnah? The Machlek is Shnuya. Beis Shammai, isn't this Beis Shammai? Right? What does Beis Shammai say in our Mishnah? La Amr Beis Shammai, didn't Beis Shammai say in our Mishnah? Ki Amma min ha'gregilus min hadvela. When he said, I'll be a Nazir from Gregorius and Dvela, what do we say in our Mishnah? Havi Nazir. The Tanakam in our Mishnah says that he's a Nazir. In other words, we listen to the first words, we ignore the second words. It's Hachinami. The same thing here. Ki Amar min ha'sa'idin is maybe min ha'chitim. When he said, I'll bring a mincha from Sa'idin, you look at the first words, mincha, and therefore you bring a proper mincha, and you ignore the second words. In other words, the Tanakam in this Mishnah is Beis Shammai of our Mishnah, according to Tanakama's version of Beis Shammai. Comes on the and he says, no. I cannot see any correlation between the Machlekes Rav Shimon Tanakamba by Mincha and our case of Nazir. And why not? I can argue that even Beis Shammai in our Mishnah, or even that everyone in our Mishnah will agree, even Beis Hillel will agree, that in this case over here, in the Mishnah by the Mincha and Achitin, let's give a Mincha. And why should that be? But he says, he said this. When he said, I'll bring a mincha from barley, it's a legitimate mistake. Why is it a legitimate mistake? Because there are certain carbonas that you bring from barley, a mincha by a seita, mincha kanois, and a mincha by an oime. So therefore, he legitimately, he taka wanted to bring a mincha, and he made a mistake. He thought this is this. I saw that bring barley. I want to bring barley. It's cheaper. I can't afford it. That's what he thinks. So in that case, everyone will agree. He's not canceling his words. He's explaining what he wanted, but he really the thrust is he wants to bring a mincha. He just thought this is good enough, so we tell him it's not good enough. It becomes a mincha chitin. In our Mishnah, everyone knows you cannot bring a mincha. A nazir from the dry figs. Nazir is wine. Everyone knows a nazir is from wine. So therefore, the second word they can't sing the first. Beis Shammai says you'll look at the first word. Beis Hillel says you look at everything that you said. Which is, but in the Mishnah here, when he said mincha and asa'odim, everyone will agree that we bring a proper mincha here because he's not canceling his words. He just made a mistake, and it's a legitimate mistake. He wants to bring a mincha. He thought you can bring from barley. Says the Gemara. I feel telling him hakel, but he says, if I would have known, If I would have known that you cannot donate a mincha made out of barley, but it artikach, elakach. I would not have made the neder out of barley. I would have said mincha out of wheat. So therefore, he's not contradicting. His second words are not contradicting the first words. In that case, everyone agrees that he's explaining his first words as a legitimate mistake, but what he really wanted was to bring a mincha. So everyone agrees. He may still agree. In this case, you bring mincha. What does that do with our Mishnah, where your second words are contradicting the first words? Nazir, and then which means wine, and then you say figs. Okay, that's a machlekes. Says the Gemara. So Chizkiah now, there's a word missing. Most of them have a word there. Hadar Amar Chizkiah. Chizkiah changes mind. Chizkiah changes mind. Amar Chizkiah, you're right. There's a difference between if he says a mincha out of barley, or if you would say a mincha out of lentils. In other words, he agrees with Rabbi Yochanan Svara. There's a difference if he, in other words, this Mishnah is only talking about if he said a mincha out of barley. Because of a legitimate mistake, therefore we say you bring a carbon mincha. Proper mincha. But if he would have said a mincha out of lentils, there is no mincha brought out of lentils, so it's not a mistake at all. Then the second words are contradicting the first ones. Then according to Beishamai, we go you go listen to the first word, it all gets cancelled. Say like this. Lo Ishon is not talking about he said from barley. If he would have said I'm going to bring a mincha from lentils, then you canceled your words. Like Basil says, when you cancel your words, nothing happened. Nothing happened. So this Tana Kama here, that's saying that if you bring from Sa'idim, you still bring a mincha, it goes to everybody. Go to everybody. But if you taka would have said Adoshim, this Basil says that you're canceling your first words, it gets cancelled, so it gets cancelled. So the Gemara, but if he said lentils, then we're saying he's contradicting his word. He doesn't want to bring a mincha because he's saying something that there's no such thing, no such kind of mincha. That's not an excuse. But the point is the words that you remember, it has to be peeve. The peeve has to lend itself. This peeve does not lend itself. So, and the words don't lend itself at all to a mincha because there's no such thing as a mincha from Adosh. Says the Gemara, Mechdi Chizkiah K'mam Chizkiah Beishamai. And so he said, if you say, he started off saying the first shot of Chizkiah, he was saying that what did Chizkiah say in the beginning? Who's the author of our Mishnah? Beishamai. He said that listen to the first word, you said mincha, we ignore the second word. If that's pshat, no, if Chizkiah right now, the Gemara doesn't, the way we're learning right now, Chizkiah didn't change his mind. He sounded like he's continuing to agree with Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're asking, how can he agree with Rabbi Yochanan? Since Chizkiah first said that the author of this Mishnah about Mincha follows Beishamai, you listen to the first words. So then why does the Mishnah, if it's Beishamai, and Beishamai in our Mishnah said, even though you're contradicting yourself, we listen to the first words. So the din in this Mishnah should have been that the Mishnah should be not only limited to Sa'orim, even if you said lentils. If the vart is like Beishamai, the way Chizkiah's answer was in the beginning, Hamani, Beishamai, then even if we said Adoshim, according to Beishamai, it's a mincha, because we listened to the first words. Ukram Beishamai have another. So Gemara says, how did Chizkiah right? When Chizkiah made his comment over here about Lo Shanu Elo Sa'odim, Adoshim, the lentils are different, he actually changed his mind. He no longer believed that the author of our Mishnah is Beishamai. Our Mishnah is according to Beis Hillel. Works out even according to Beis Hillel, because as long as you said barley is a legitimate mistake, you're explaining yourself. But lentils is a contradiction, and Beis Hillel says you don't listen to the first word. You contradict yourself, you cancel the whole thing. Says the Gemara, by my hardebay, to change your mind, there has to be some compelling problem. What bothered Chizkiah that he decided to change his mind no longer Beishamai? This very thing bothered him. If the Mishnah is Beishamai, shouldn't the Mishnah have said a bigger chiddush? Instead of saying I'm bringing a chita from barley and you're telling me yes, go bring a mincha from wheat, say a bigger chiddush. I said I'll bring a mincha from lentils. I'll bring it from lentils, and tell me still that you bring it from wheat, because that's what Beishamai holds. Wouldn't that be a much bigger chiddush? Because there Beis Hillel disagree. Why does the Mishnah limit itself only to barley? If you said I'll bring a mincha from barley, bring a mincha from wheat. Because we're following Beis Hillel. But in this case here, it's a legitimate error, and he's explaining himself. That's what caused Chizkiah to change his mind. Initially, he thought it was Beishamai, but then he thought himself as Beishamai. Why talk about barley and lentils? Amar Rava Masnisi Kashi said. The bothered was a Mishnah. Why does it say that you said, I'll bring a mincha from barley, least the minadoshim? Say a bigger chiddush. I'll bring a mincha from lentils. And yet the mincha is made out of wheat because we follow Beishamai. Listen to the first words. Chizkiah holds, when does Beishamai say Hasam Kirab Yehuda? Chizkiah would hold, he completely changed his mind, that he maybe he holds an Al Mishnah B'chlal Beishamai is Rabbi Yehuda's version. Not even talking about Nazir at all. Talking about it's an eder. And therefore don't do Beishamai. But Rabbi Yochanan said, Afilu min adashim. Rabbi Yochanan said, even from lentils, Rabbi Yochanan said, even from lentil, Beishamai would hold you go after the first words and you would be chayv. The Gemara says, how can you tell me? Rabbi Yochanan learned in our Mishnah here where it says, I'll bring a mincha from chitim. Rabbi Yochanan made a comment, even if he would have said a mincha from lentils, he'd also bring a mincha of wheat. Why? Because you follow the first words. Now, but Rabbi Yochanan is the one who just said that the whole pshat in our Mishnah is that you made a legitimate error thinking that you can bring a mincha from that. And that's the only reason why and therefore we're saying you bring a mincha from wheat. And then Rabbi Yochanan makes a comment, and the truth of the matter is in this Mishnah, it makes no difference whether it's wheat, it's lentil, because you listen, like Beishamai, listen to the first words. What's going on here? Yechanan's comment over here that if he would have known, he's talking to Chizkiah. At my time, why did you change your mind? Everyone changes their mind. But we thought one way, now actually the opposite. And Chizkiah one way changed your mind. You changed your mind. You first thought it was Beishamai. And why? That you look at the first words and then you decide, no, it's Beishamai. Then why talk about barley? Talk about lentils. So therefore, you decide it's not Beishamai. You thought it goes according to everybody because it's a legitimate error. That's what your reasons, right? My time, why did you change your mind? Because it should have said in the Mishnah, for lentils. Maybe the pshat in the Mishnah is loyme boy. What do you mean loyme boy? I don't have to tell you. Loyme boy kama madoshim. If he would have said lentils, the maisi mincha ma'alis. Forget. In a case where I can argue in a svara just opposite. The lentils is more reason to say you bring wheat than if he said barley. And why is that? If he said a mincha from lentils, he's contradicting himself. Mincha is wheat. Lentils, nobody brings a mincha from lentils. He's contradicting. Well, listen to the first word he says. The ma'isi mincha is equal mema mehed the hadabei. He's changing his mind. He started out saying mincha, he meant wheat. Then he comes along and says lentils, no such mincha. That means he doesn't want to bring a mincha. You want to cancel. But it's less tradition. You follow the first words you say. The chiddush here is even if it's barley. So l'chayra, you can say he's not changing his mind. He always wanted to give a mincha from barley, and if no such mincha exists, then no mincha at all. You can argue fakir that if he said a mincha from barley, maybe there's no mincha at all. By mincha from lentils, he's trying to take back what he said initially, because there is no such thing as a mincha from lentils. And Beishamai says, you listen to the first words you say. But when you say a mincha from barley, you're not retracting, because you thought the mincha is made out of barley, so that's what you wanted all along. You never intended to have a normal mincha out of wheat, so maybe we dropped the whole thing. That's what we would have thought. The chiddush mission is, no, you still bring wheat. He thought, I'll make it holy like a mincha zaymer or a mincha saita. He knew that a saita brings this kind. Tigdish, Eloi, and maybe if I can't, that's all I can afford is barley. Because Michael Behema, food of an animal. But if you want me to bring wheat, I can't afford it. So maybe the whole thing should be null and void. Brings wheat. So therefore, the Mishnah can go according to everybody, and you don't have to. In other words, the reason why you change your whole mind that can't be according to Beishamai, because then why talk about lentils? Why not talk about lentils? And I'm thinking, forget. The Mishnah is Beishamai. You go after the first words, and that's why. So why don't talk about lentil? Because there's a big chiddush by Sairim. Because in this case, he's not contradicting himself; he's explaining himself, and it's a legitimate error. So maybe it's not two separate words. Maybe it's one long word, mincha out of barley, and even Beishamai would agree. We would think Beishamai would agree in this case. Well, he wants to make a mincha out of barley. No such thing. No, nothing. No, not. So therefore, the Mishnah says no. Beishamai says you listen to the first words, and that's all that counts. Okay. Okay, that's the Gemara. Wasn't so easy, but Baruch Hashem. Huh?